All right, welcome back to Lecture 6 on submittals. So there are different types of submittals on any given project. First are pre-construction submittals. So generally, no work should begin until all the required pre-construction submittals have been submitted by the contractor and approved by the design team and the owner. These items are typically found in Division 0 and 1 in the specifications, but they're also could be spread throughout the general conditions and supplemental conditions or even in the contract. So you should really identify all of them and keep track of them in the submittal register. So these typically include things like schedule values, which we'll talk about in more detail later. Baseline schedule, again, like we mentioned earlier, maybe 60-day schedule or a 2 week look ahead schedule. Coordination drawings, utility service interruption plan. You may have existing building that you have to turn the gas off or the power off or the fire alarm off, things like that. So that should be identified in an interruption plan. Waste management plan, that might include recyclables or lead requirements as well. Staff list, we should know who's on the project. Contractor's quality control plan, contractor's safety and accident prevention plan. You might need a cutting and patching plan, maybe you're tying into existing stuff. Building permits, you really shouldn't start any project without your building permits, if there's any required. Some projects, like I said, some state and federal don't require them, so it's not a big deal, but most private jobs do. Um, Dewatering erosion control plan, maybe have to deal with that. Traffic mitigation plan, you may have something where you're rerouting a road or foot traffic. Dust mitigation plan, maybe it's a dusty site. Hazardous materials plan, you might have lead or asbestos or something. Hot and cold weather protection plan. Indoor air quality plan, noise management plan, or long lead items. So a lot of these items, these are front end pre-construction submittals. A lot of them seem to get forgotten. Contractor just provides them when somebody asks for them, but you should stay on top of them and just have them in place. Then you have construction phase submittals. So these are submittals that relate to the actual work being performed and are required to be submitted by the contractor and approved by the architect. Again, um, these typically include product data, shop drawings, product samples, warranty samples, qualifications, mill certifications, test reports, manufacturer instructions and calculations, all kinds of stuff. These are identified in divisions 2 through 48. This is your technical spec. Um, there may also be additional items, again, found in the contract or your general and supplemental conditions. So it's important to identify these as well. And they should go in the submittal register, which we'll talk about uh, as we go along. Most contracts allot for 10 days for 10 business days for the design team to review submittals, and often they'll add an additional week for each subconsultant. So it's in the contractor's best interest to submit all the submittals as soon as possible. It's always a battle on every project, dragging their feet, and it's just there's no rhyme or reason to it. I just think people, they're busy subcontracting, so and then once they do that, then they have to chase the subcontractor for their submittal. So it's important to get them in as soon as possible, but it's also important to prioritize. You want to make sure that you're getting the stuff you're performing now submitted first. Obviously, if you're worried about painting or carpet, it's at the end of the job. Focus on your front end stuff. Everybody kind of gets it. But that's why you kind of have a submittal schedule to tell us when we should be getting everything. So the contractor should not proceed with any work associated with any particular submittal until such time as the architect has indicated that the submittal is complete and approved. Otherwise, you're just proceeding at your own risk. If you install something and it wasn't maybe didn't have all the right performance criteria, the architect could make you rip it out. So you want to make sure that before you proceed with any work, you have approved submittal. That's the whole key of getting them in early. So what are some important submittals? Important submittals should be submitted early. That's the key. That's anything that needs to be submitted early. So anything like owner furnished items, the owner should already have what they're submitting, but they want to make sure that if an owner is submitting something, um, they still need to have a submittal because the contractor has to know if his electrician is connecting to the right furniture, that the wiring is all correct and the circuiting is all correct and that kind of stuff. So even if an owner's furnishing it, they should be submitting their submittal to the contractor kind of more of an informational thing, but usually they submit it. Any long lead items, and I'll get to those in more detail. Baseline schedule, schedule values, coordination drawings, Division 1, Division 2. These are things that you really should get submitted as soon as possible because they're important. The submittal process is very important, especially if the contractor wants to start construction right away. Getting all the submittals in and approved is critical. The contractor should focus on submitting the most important ones first, and which includes long lead items or first 60 days, anything that's going to happen right away or it's going to take a long time to get. But don't overburden the architect. Don't bury them with painting on day one when painting isn't for 9 months. Focus on concrete, steel, earthwork, elevators, long lead items, stuff like that. The contractor should also make sure that the submittals follow the 4Cs rule. And I talk about this more in how to hold owners more accountable class, but in the CSI manual, there's something called the 4Cs, which basically means, and drawings and architects should follow this as well. It basically means if you submit something, it should be clear, concise, correct, and complete, and absent of any ambiguities and subjectiveness. So you want to make sure that when you're submitting, it's complete. Don't submit something, and then the architect is saying, "Well, you submitted, 7 out of the 10 things. Where I need the other 3." You don't want to slow down the process. So it's the contractor's job to make sure it's correct, not just the architect's. So you want to make sure everything is correct when you submit it and as complete as possible. And if you don't know something, that's when you have a conversation with the architect. If you need to RFI it to confirm something, but you shouldn't be just passing paper. You should be reviewing these submittals. Most specifications require that the submittal has the contractor stamp on it, that they reviewed and approved it. So sometimes they just rubber stamping and send along, and if it comes back with all these things missing, then the contractor's not doing their job. Long lead items. So we briefly talked about this. Let's get into this a little bit more detail. So on a lot of projects, there are many, many long lead items. This is a list of them and some time frames on average. These are obviously standard lead times, but they can change based on the manufacturer and any impacting factors. So, doors and frames can take 3 to 4 months. That's the day you release the purchase order, not the review process. So keep that in mind when you're going through all this stuff. That's not the day you submit the submittal. That's the day the contractor pulls the trigger on releasing the contractor on ordering them. So basically executes the purchase order. So door and frames can take 3 to 4 months. Same thing with signage, light fixtures, precast concrete, loading dock equipment, casework, and aluminum storefront is averaging 4 to 6 months. Office furniture and elevators, 6 to 8 months. Roofing insulation and membrane, that one's been really long lately, as well as steel joists. They can take 9 to 12 months. Electrical switchgear generators and rooftop units have been averaging over a year. So those sometimes are items that owner sometimes will purchase. Not very often. They might purchase the generator, maybe the rooftop units if they're experienced, but just keep in mind those items take a long time nowadays to get. And there's a lot of reasons for it. Some of the factors impacting the long lead items are, product availability. Maybe the manufacturer just isn't making them fast enough for demand, or maybe whatever you're ordering is customized. Maybe it's not a standard product, so it's got too many bells and whistles, so they have to customize them, which may take a while. Manufacturing delays, maybe it's manpower or strikes. Raw material shortages was a big issue lately. Shipping delays. There was we heard about that a while back, where there's some port issues because port employees were on strike, so ships were sitting out in the ocean because they couldn't come to port. Customs, sometimes things go into customs and they just sit there until customs gets a chance to look at them. It's kind of out of your control. Political unrest, union strikes, the pandemic, we all just went through that, so don't have to say too much on that, we all know. But also submittal approval. If it takes too long to get the submittal approved, that's going to impact when the items are ordered. So it's important to get submittals in early and approved. And that's why I fall back to my 4Cs rule, that they got to be complete before architect should review them because then it should just be checking the box.